So, what is a mixer? Mixers, sometimes called tumblers, are services that make it difficult to trace the funds of a transaction. They can be used for legitimate purposes. However, they are very popular amongst criminals to launder the proceeds of their crimes. Now, mixers can be centralized, which means that a user would deposit their funds to a wallet controlled by the mixer. They can also be decentralized, so they might operate via smart contracts in a decentralized fashion. And Tornado Cash is an example of a decentralized mixer. I should add that there are also what we call privacy wallets, which are pieces of software that allow users to mix coins with other users using the same software. All of this while still controlling their funds, so without using any third party. And what they do is typically they create so-called coin join transactions on the blockchain. Now, we're not going to cover coin join transactions in this presentation, but it's important to know that they exist. Now, let's have a look at this image here. It is a simplified version of what happens in a mixing service. So users would combine their crypto assets into a pool of funds, and then the mixer would mix these funds in such a way that to break the link between the deposits and the withdrawals. So that means that for a blockchain analyst, it would be difficult to link, let's say, the green deposit to the green withdrawal, the blue to the blue, and the yellow to the yellow. Operationally, what happens, let's say, with centralized mixer is that a user would deposit their funds into a deposit address controlled by the mixer, and then would ask for these funds to be withdrawn to a different wallet owned by the user. Now, the user would essentially get back the same deposit that they send to the mixer, minus a commission that is given to the mixer. And the mixer would use their own liquidity, as I said, to break the link between deposit and withdrawals. Now, there are hundreds of mixers, some more popular than others. On the top here, you see a popular one called ChipMixer. Another popular one is Tornado Cash. However, after sanctions hit it, it's definitely become less popular, as we are going to see in the next few slides. Mixers, unfortunately, make the life of a blockchain analyst very difficult. So imagine you are interested in a deposit going into Tornado Cash, and you have this challenge next. Which one of these potential outputs is the only one that is linked to the deposit, to the input? How can I trace through this mixer? Unfortunately, in general, it's not possible to trace through a mixer, as we say. Although sometimes users make mistakes like they withdraw funds into a wallet that has some transactional link to the input, or they might deposit large amounts in mixers that have little liquidity, so unpopular mixers. That means that it's more difficult to hide in the crowd. Sometimes it's also possible to use blockchain analytics to trace through a mixer. Here is an example of a high-profile case that we've been able to successfully demix. Is the 100 million Horizon hack. What happened is that on June 2022, over $100 million in crypto assets were stolen from the Horizon Bridge, a service that allows assets to be transferred between the Harmony blockchain and other blockchains. So the stolen crypto assets include ETH, USDT, Wrapped Bitcoin, WBTC, and Binance Coin, BNB. The thief immediately used Uniswap, a decentralized exchange or DEX, to convert the Ethereum-based assets into a total of more than 85,000 ETH. Use indexes is a common laundering technique used to avoid seizure of stolen assets. In fact, if you think about using centralized exchanges instead, a thief would be presented with a challenge of compliance control. So potentially, their assets could be seized by the centralized exchange. That's why they often use decentralized exchanges. Now, after using Uniswap, the thief started moving the ETH into Tornado Cash, and they deposited their funds in chunks of 100 ETH to the 100 ETH Tornado Cash smart contracts. They did this money laundering activity during the course of 6 days. And this is what we see here in this chart. On the y-axis is a unique ID, unique for each deposit or withdrawal address using this 100 ETH smart contract. On the x-axis is time over the course of this window between the 27th of June and the 4th of July, 2022. So the black crosses represent deposits of 100 ETH into the smart contracts. The red crosses represent instead withdrawals from the smart contracts. The green crosses are deposits that were considered irrelevant by our analysts. So we were able to identify 14 groups of laundering activity, and we were able to successfully determine the withdrawals that would correspond to the deposits from this hack. So these are the blue withdrawals, blue crosses, sorry. So this is an example of successfully being able to trace through a mixer. In general, however, mixers are a big deal because it is difficult to trace through them. 2 mixers have already been sanctioned. You see here in this image that OFAC in May 2022, for the first time, sanctioned a virtual currency mixer. It was the case of Blender.io. And also many more mixers have been seized or have led to the arrest of their operators. For example, in 2019, the Dutch police seized servers belonging to the mixer called bestmixer.io. Now let's move to the Tornado Cash. As mentioned, Tornado Cash is a decentralized mixer that has processed over the course of its lifetime so far, let's say, $7 billion of funds. We have identified at least $1.5 billion from illicit sources. It is known that Tornado Cash was used by the North Korean Lazarus Group to hide the source of their hacks. If we break down the illicit incoming to Tornado Cash, we see that the majority belongs to thefts, over $1 billion, but also a big chunk from sanctioned entities, and the remaining from fraud. Here is another high-profile example of money laundered through Tornado Cash. It's about the Ronin hack that happened in March 2022. The Ronin network in March 2022 announced that effectively more than $500 million had been stolen from the network. It was after discovered that the thefts belong to North Korea Lazarus Group. These hackers started laundering the proceeds of their hack, and more than $80 million worth of ETH were sent through Tornado Cash. The hackers used intermediary wallet, as you see here, before moving the funds to Tornado Cash. Just a few months after, we are in August 2022, OFAC sanctioned Tornado Cash. So for the first time, a smart contract has been sanctioned by OFAC. As you can see from this chart, this resulted after August 2022 in a sharp decline in the usage of Tornado Cash. You see it here from the blue line, for example, a sharp drop in the usage of Tornado Cash, which is bad for a mixer, because having lower liquidity means that is not efficient, the mixer, in mixing the funds from different users. As I said, it is more difficult to hide it in the crowd if there is little liquidity, if the mixing service is not that popular. An interesting side effect of these sanctions was also that it was possible to actually it's still possible to dust celebrities or whoever really with dirty coins. So coins coming from Tornado. It's as easy as making small deposit to Tornado and then sending the funds to known wallets that are owned by celebrities, for example. The thing is that this is something unstoppable simply because you cannot stop a smart contract from doing its job. The smart contract really is just a piece of code that obeys the rules that are written immutably on the blockchain, forever on the blockchain. So as you can see here, the Treasury reacted to this by then declaring that the dusted celebrities would not be punished. This concludes our deep dive on mixers and Tornado Cash. Thank you for listening.